What's up, guys? It's your girl T, back on this fine Sunday with yet another movie review that literally nobody asked for. I just saw Once Upon a Time in Hollywood yesterday, and I had planned to get my review up yesterday, but I know myself, I like to sit and let things percolate and marinate. So now that my thoughts have congealed a bit more, that was a disgusting word choice, let's talk about it, because this film has been anticipated very highly. And not just because it's a Quentin Tarantino film, because all of his films are anticipated pretty highly, but also because it's set in late 1960s Hollywood against the backdrop of the doings of the so-called Manson family led by Charles Manson. However, let me reiterate and stress that that is the backdrop of this film, and it seems to have been more prominent in the press and lead up to this film's release more than it is in the film itself. Having said that, if you know the real life events, you'll know why they'd cast a big name like Margot Robbie to play Sharon Tate. Nonetheless, this movie is not about Charles Manson, nor is it about Sharon Tate. The story here is really about a Hollywood actor whose star is fading. His name is Rick Dalton, and he's played by Leonardo DiCaprio. So the focus is on him, as well as his friendship with his stunt double named Cliff Booth, who's of course played by Brad Pitt. Inevitably, with Cliff's wagon hitched to a fading star, both Cliff and Rick are in their own hustles, but they remain friends and codependent even to a degree. I actually saw this movie on 75mm in the historic Cinerama Dome because I am a loser and that kind of thing is very exciting to me. And coincidentally, there's actually a quick shot of the Cinerama Dome during a montage of just historic and iconic places around LA within the film, and it was a bit surreal to see that, to see the building you're in the film you're watching. So everyone actually clapped and cheered when that shot came up in the theater. It was pretty funny. This is the 9th film by Quentin Tarantino, though he does not remind us of this at the very beginning, as he often does, the 8th film by Quentin Tarantino and so forth. So he seems to have at least partially removed his head from his own ass. I gotta give it to him. Once Upon a Time in Hollywood is far less masturbatory than a lot of Quentin Tarantino's more recent outings. It's still too long at around 2 hours 40, but it managed to feel far less self-indulgent than, say, Django Unchained, Hateful Eight, and a few others. For a movie that is pushing a 3-hour TRT damn near, I did find that it was paced quite well, and there wasn't a lot of obvious trimming that needed to be done. I think the lengthy runtime is due to Tarantino taking his time to establish characters, as well as to give us pieces of information that we really need, and which often end up paying off in very satisfying ways later on in the film. So while I still believe that the correct length for all movies is 90 minutes and no longer, this is one of the longer films that I would happily rewatch. Quentin Tarantino is in that echelon of modern directors who pretty much always go longer than is probably warranted with TRT. Paul Thomas Anderson, Martin Scorsese, Christopher Nolan, you get the drift. And sometimes those longer runtimes are warranted. After all, despite my love and insistence on a crisp 90, I did see There Will Be Blood in theaters twice. And sometimes those longer runtimes are not warranted. I'm just saying, in this case, I'm good with it. Tarantino is working with some talent that is familiar to him, in this case with Pitt, who plays Cliff, as well as DiCaprio, who plays Rick. He has worked with them both on Inglourious Basterds, as well as Django Unchained, respectively. Personally, I really enjoy it when directors almost have their own companies, like theater companies, and in this case, Tarantino even has a section in the end credits where he refers to the gang, which is a lot of the familiar faces we've seen throughout his body of work. Filmmaking is such a collaborative process, so your muses and other collaborators are critical in allowing you to do your best work. It's the same reason I tend to hire the same crew and post crew on all of my projects, because they make it look like I'm really good at my job when I'm actually a total hack. Al Pacino is also in this film, although I hate to say in the last decade or two of his career he has become a bit self-parodying. And I was a bit nervous because I thought the combination of Al Pacino and Quentin Tarantino was going to be a recipe for Speech City, because Al Pacino, I mean, he's almost known for giving speeches in films. He's an absentee landlord. And Tarantino, going back to that self-indulgence, he loves to put a lot of speeches in just to flex his dialogue writing skills. But I'm happy to say that the Pacino-Tarantino combination ended up not being a recipe for monologue overload. Performance-wise, Leonardo DiCaprio, really funny. When it really comes down to it, Leonardo DiCaprio really is just a great actor. I often forget that is the case, and I often forget that he actually is really funny. funny. We saw this in Wolf of Wall Street. He deserved an Oscar for that Quaalude sequence alone. He didn't get it, but at least he did get it the next year for The Revenant instead. Very well deserved. And largely considered to be overdue. I know for me, when I was a kid, I never really thought much of Leonardo DiCaprio. I thought he was just another pretty boy. I mean, to this day, I've still never even seen Titanic because I don't care. Not my thing. If I'm gonna watch James Cameron, I'm gonna watch Terminator 2 or True Lies. Anyway, I felt the same way about Brad Pitt as well for a very long time. But as the years have gone by, I'm really delighted to have been completely wrong about dismissing his very real acting chops. Although to an extent, I often feel like I'm just watching Brad Pitt playing Brad Pitt, which is silly because I don't know what Brad Pitt is really like, and I also don't know what Leonardo DiCaprio is really like, so even though they're so iconic and they've been so famous for so long, I think the fact that they're not really in the public eye like that actually really helps them to immerse themselves in roles in ways that don't break the fourth wall as much with the audience. Because we don't really know what these guys are like, it gives us the necessary distance to really be able to enjoy their performances. And DiCaprio and Pitt are fun together. I get the impression that they're actually friends in real life. In fact, they're probably partying on a yacht with David Blaine and a whole bunch of models half their age at this very moment. Leave a cat emoji if you know what posse I'm referring to right now. Anyway, another thing I really loved about Once Upon a Time in Hollywood is that there is no cameo from Quentin Tarantino. Growth. This film also does not have any Samuel L. Jackson in it, which almost feels a bit off-brand at this point in Tarantino's career. Overall, this is actually one of Quentin Tarantino's least diverse films, a la Inglourious, or even going all the way back to Reservoir Dogs. There are 0 black characters whatsoever, aside from an extra or 2. But we do get some lighthearted cultural insensitivity directed at some Mexican background actors a couple of times, so at least there's that. What this film lacks in diversity, it makes up for in shots of women's bare feet. So many feet. So very many dirty feet. If you were somehow unaware of Quentin Tarantino's obvious foot fetish from his other films, you won't be unaware of it after watching this one. Along with a rather white cast, which isn't really a critique, it's an observation because 1960s Hollywood was very, very white, much like it is now, and it's only beginning to change, due in no small part to directors like Quentin Tarantino being more inclusive in some of his other films. But this film also lacks any substantive women characters. All of the women in this film are tools, whether that tool is to be a straight-up MacGuffin or to otherwise give us information or drive the plot for one of the male characters in some fashion. Because again, this movie is pretty much about Leonardo DiCaprio's character and Brad Pitt's character. And the fact that Brad Pitt's character Cliff is a stunt guy is actually really brilliant and great, because the way his physicality is established in the film from having that job lends itself not just to some great humor moments, but just some business of the actual film. It also creates a lot of tension and expectations in terms of the scenes that follow once we learn more about who he is, what his background is, and what he's capable of. Cliff is a man of few words, and I find that both in movies and in life, the less a person says, the more you want to listen when they do speak. DiCaprio as Rick is so emotional. He's a man of high highs and low lows, and it's great. It makes him this laughable wreck, a pastiche of the equal parts fragility and megalomania that encompasses the stereotypical actor. But he plays it so masterfully that you can both laugh at his pain and still root for him. As I said earlier, I think this movie is very much about friendship, which is funny because I just reviewed The Last Black Man in San Francisco last Sunday, which is another movie about friendship, at least in my opinion. And while I don't think that The Last Black Man in San Francisco and this movie could be any more different than they are, I do really enjoy seeing such similar themes explored in such divergent ways. I can't really say too much else about this film without getting into spoiler territory, so we'll just leave it there. I think I've said plenty. But if you guys do want to do a spoilerlicious discussion, maybe in a week or two after some of you guys have seen it, do let me know. Just hit the thumbs up or leave a comment or something, or both. But if you were curious and weren't sure if you wanted to shell out the 15 bucks or whatever it costs to see a movie in your area, I do recommend this highly. So there you have it. There goes my Nobody Asked You Ho review on Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. I am also planning to review Pat McGrath's new foundation. See, this channel, it makes no sense. Foundation reviews, movie reviews, this girl does it all. Both Pat McGrath's new foundation and this movie came out on Friday, and I was pretty keen to check both out, so here we are. So depending on when you're watching this review, I will link the Pat McGrath foundation review right here. It does include a wear test, and if no link just popped up over my shoulder just now, then it means that you're watching this movie review very, very early, and I'm still editing it. So thank you for being one of the early adopters on this movie review, and I will see you guys again today for another Sunday double feature. It's not 2 movies this Sunday, it's movies and makeup, because that's what I care about, I guess. Anyway, that's all I'm going to say for now about Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, but if you've seen it already and you want to share your thoughts, please be respectful of not leaving any spoilers in the comments section. You know, maybe skip a few lines so that it won't be in the top line and you won't ruin it for anyone who might be reading through. But beyond that, I got nothing else, so I'm going to get out of here and get cracking on editing my Pat McGrath review. So yeah, I'll see you guys later, and always remember, never trust anyone with a Morphe code. Bye-bye.
That's a nappy-headed hose there, I'm going to tell you that now.